Shalom and Maranatha. Welcome to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic channel. Today we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 33. There are 29 verses, beginning in verse 2. It says, us versus them, referring to Yah has come from Sinai and has appeared from Seir to us. So this is the blessing with which Moshe, the man of Elohim, blessed the children of Israel before his death. So this actually sounds like a prophecy where Yah has come from Sinai and has appeared from Seir to us and has hasted out of the mount of Paran with the 10,000s of Kadesh. On his right hand were his angels with him. So that sounds like a prophecy. It doesn't sound like something that has happened yet. So again, verse 2 is us versus them, has appeared to them. Who are them? We don't know who them is. But when we think of us, it's talking about Israel, talking about the Messiah appearing to Israel with his 10,000s of angels. And Kadesh means holy ones, set apart ones. In the Masoretic it says saints. So significant difference here is hasted. It says here hasted out of the Mount of Paran. So he was hurrying up to rescue Israel physically, to be physically there, versus he shined forth from Mount Paran. So only the beams of light or the extension of his presence was there, but not physically there in the Masoretic. And then it says Kadesh again, which again means holy, or can mean holy, Kodesh or Kadesh. On the other hand, the saints on the Masoretic side. So the big difference here is on his right hand, his angels with him. Again, his set apart ones. Perhaps it's his saints, could be his angels. I'm leaning towards the angels part because, again, in the previous chapter, as we saw, it's talking about his angels were with him. So this is only confirming that it is most likely his angels, versus his right hand, a fiery law for them, went a fiery law. So again, a big difference is his angels versus a fiery law. I believe this is a prophecy indeed of the day of Yah. Verse 3, and he spared his people, Israel, essentially. Yea, he loved the people and all his. All his saints, the people and followers of Christ, perhaps. Sanctified ones, saints, are under your Father's hands. So his sanctified ones in the Septuagint are under your hands, meaning the Father's hands. Versus all his saints are in your hand. So this is just referring to Christ's saints in the Father's hand. And they, his set apart ones, are under you. The Father or the Son, I'm not sure which one it is. And he received of his words. So the Son received the Father's words. Versus they sat down at your feet. Everyone shall receive of your words. So it seems to be only one Elohim, one God is represented here, at least in the Masoretic. Okay, verse 4. This verse continues from verse 3. In the Septuagint, his words in verse 3 being the law. So, and he received of his words the law which Moses charged us, an inheritance to the assemblies of Jacob. So this is a parenthetical verse since it interrupts the prophetic narrative. So this verse is separate in the Masoretic text. Moses commanded us a law, the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Verse 5, Masoretic, and he was king in Jeshurun, when the heads of the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. So this is the past. It's referring to Moses being a type of king over Israel. In the Septuagint, it reads like this, and he shall be prince with the beloved one. So this is future. This is not talking about the past. In the Septuagint, it's referring to a future time when possibly, now again, I'm not saying this dogmatically, but I'm saying potentially King David is resurrected and ruling alongside Christ. Christ Jesus is the conquering king at his second coming. So he shall be prince, talking about King David, with the beloved one, the Mashiach, when the princes of the people are gathered together with the tribes of Israel. So the princes of the people are gathered together. This could be the princes are the rulers of the Gentile nations who come to surround Jerusalem and make war. They are waging war on the Lamb, on the Messiah. Actually, not really the Lamb, but the Lion now, the Lion of Judah. Because when we say Lamb, it's talking about his first coming. But although, to be fair, in Revelation, it does refer to him as the Lamb as well. But it's not the suffering Messiah in any case. Verse 6, big difference here. Let him be many in number. Versus let not his men be few. So the not was inserted. It was not originally there. No pun intended. Many is clearly a blessing. Let him be many in number. Versus being few is a curse. So we can see they are exact opposites in the Sept and the Masoretic, the Septuagint. Talking about Reuben. Verse 7, and you do visit his people. You will visit his descendants. So here, Lord Adonai, the voice of Judah, and you do visit his people. You will visit his descendants versus you bring him unto his people. So that's reminiscent of when someone dies in the scriptures and is gathered to his people. His hands shall contend for him in the Septuagint. So they will fight for him. Versus let his hands be sufficient for him. So they may or may not be sufficient. And you shall be a help from his enemies. So he will certainly help, talking about Adonai. You shall be a help from his enemies. You're going to save him. And be you a help to him from his enemies. So he may or may not help. Because they're asking. In the Masoretic, they're asking, please help. You help. But in the Septuagint, it is emphatic. It is certain. You shall be a help. You will. They're fully confident and they're faithful. This will happen. This is a prophecy, actually. Just to remind you, this is a prophecy of Moses to Judah. An inheritance to the assemblies of Jacob, so to the tribe of Judah. And this is now to Moses' tribe, Levi. Give to Levi his manifestations and his truth to the holy man. Verses, your Thummim and your Urim be with your Holy One. So they are to be given to the high priest. So it is a set apart man, whom they tempted in the temptation. They reviled him at the water of strife. So perhaps this is in reference to Moses and Aaron, when they tempted and tested them, the people did by their rebellion, whom you did prove at Massah, and with whom you did strive at the waters of Meribah. So this is in reference to Yah, I believe, in the Masoretic. Verse 9, I have not seen you, referring to father and mother. I have not seen you, versus I have not seen him, referring to possibly Yah, saying to the parents of Levi, I have not seen him, which is not really a blessing at all. It's actually confusing in the Masoretic. There's a big difference in verse 10. In the time of your wrath, continually. So let's just read this, the context. They shall declare your ordinances to Jacob and your law to Israel. They shall place incense in the time of your wrath, continually upon your altar. So it sounds like they're making intercession due to the wrath of Yah. Verses before you, they shall put incense before you, and whole burnt sacrifice. So this is referring to a specific time, in the time of his wrath. So it sounds like the day of Yah, in my opinion. Verses referring to the sacrifice itself, and not specifying the reason why they would be making supplication, why they would be putting incense before Yah himself, or even the time frame. Verse 11, strength, his strength, bless his strength versus his substance. Verse 12, confidence, dwell in confidence versus safety. So it's one thing to be in safety, it's another thing to be in confidence, to have faith in. Always, Elohim overshadows him always, and forever, what it means forever, versus all the day long, so not during the night. So we can see the difference there. This is to Benjamin, Elohim overshadows him always, and he rested between his shoulders, versus dwell between his shoulders. In verse 13, of the seasons of the sky, or of the seasons of sky and dew, and of the deeps of wells below, verses for the precious things of heaven, and for the dew, and for the deep that couches beneath. So what is the difference there? Doesn't seem to be a drastic difference, just a difference of expression. Seasons of sky and dew, so seasons could refer to the Moedim. The precious things of heaven is more vague, you're not sure what precious things mean. The deeps of wells below, it's kind of cryptic in both. Deeps of wells are a source of water. The deep that couches beneath is even more cryptic, because you're not sure if it's talking about the ocean or below the earth. Verse 14, of the changes of the sun in season, again, it seems to be referring to the Moedim, and of the produce of the months. So, as we know, if you do know about the Moedim and the feast, so the feast days do They work with the agricultural months. They seem to work in tandem in terms of the way they are kept. You have the Aviv barley to begin the year, and then you have the wheat, and then you have the last part of the harvest, which is the Feast of Ingathering, and that coincides with the Feast of Tabernacles and the Fall Festival. So it seems to be hearkening to that. Verses by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon. So again, it's more, seems to be more cryptic and less specific in regards to seasons. It's just saying precious things, but it actually is referring to season put forth by the moon. So moon and months are very closely related, but it's not talking about a time frame. It's talking about the moon in the Masoretic. So you can interpret that in many ways, but when you see it as months, when you read it as months and produce of the months, you're most likely talking about the harvest seasons, which again coincide with the feast days, the Moedim, in Leviticus 23. Verse 15, top, from the top of the ancient mountains versus the chief things / precious things. So you can see top is replaced 2 times or substituted with those terms. Verse 16, fullness of the land in season versus precious things of the earth and fullness. Let the things pleasing to him that dwelt in the bush come on the head of Joseph. Perhaps this is clean meat, such as game, such as deer, etc. Versus the goodwill of him that dwelt in the bush. Let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph. So people who perhaps live in the bush will bless and live in harmony with Joseph. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in the Masoretic, or these people in the bush that are going to bless Joseph versus him that dwelt in the bush. The things pleasing to him that dwelt in the bush come on that of Joseph. It does sound like that he's going to be eating the clean meat, these animals. The fullness of the land, things pleasing to him that dwelt in the bush. Yeah, so it does sound like animals, perhaps even fruit. I'm really not sure, but it is not some group of people or people group who live in the bush and they're going to bless Joseph, which sounds a little strange in my opinion. Big difference is glorified above. So on the crown of him who was glorified above his brethren, referring to Joseph again, versus separated from his brethren. So we can see honor, being glorified is honor, versus shame, being separated. It's like you're being shunned, you're being isolated from the community, and that's not what is being spoken of here. These are blessings from Moses to the tribes of Israel, not curses. Verse 17, his beauty, just fast forward, the horns of a unicorn. Unicorn means a rhino. It's not some mythical creature that never existed that looks like a horse with the horn of a narwhal coming out of its forehead. That's not what it is. It is a rhino, a rhinoceros, which they tend to have one horn on the tip of their nose. So one question I ask here, is Joseph America and Great Britain, as many people who subscribe to the Armstrongism believe? Well, I kind of, I'm not sure. I'm not going to say it is or it isn't, but it seems possible, especially given the relationship that they have with modern Israel. That can't be discounted. Okay, a huge difference in 19. There's an omission here of they shall utterly destroy the nations. And he shall call men there, versus they shall call the people. Okay, so they will utterly destroy the nations. So who are they? Who are these they that is being referred to here? It sounds like Zabulon and Issachar. Perhaps it's referring to them. It's hard to say who they are. But the nations shall be destroyed versus calling to the people. So if you're calling, they call to the people, that's peaceful. You're just extending an invitation versus killing the nations is a whole thing altogether. It's a different story. It's a different narrative. And then there's an addition of to the mountain. So is it Zebulun or the people offering? It is unclear. For the wealth of the sea shall suckle you, shall feed you, and so shall the marts of men, that dwell by the sea coast. So the sea merchandise is going to feed you. Referring to Zebulun. Verses, they shall suck of the abundance of the seas and of treasures hid in the sand. So they added treasure hid in sand. Verse 20, rested versus dwells. Having broken the arm and the ruler versus tears the arm with the crown of the head. Verse 21, he saw his first fruits versus he provided himself the first part. So we can see that I didn't write it here, but Yah is the provider of the first fruits. So that's the blessing there. But if you're providing the first part for yourself, that's not really something being done for you. You're working for that. Result. Significant difference here is the land of the princes gathered with the chiefs of the people was divided. So the land of the princes gathered with the chiefs of the people. So that's like parenthetical. So the land, and then brackets, of the princes gathered with the chiefs of the people, bracket, was divided. Versus a portion of the lawgiver was he seated. And he came with the heads of the people. So that can be taken many ways. So if you're in the Masoretic, you're thinking, okay, all right, the lawgiver is there. He's seated and he's there. So perhaps that's talking about Elohim, the one who gave the law to Moses. On the other hand, in the Septuagint, you're talking about the princes gathered with the chiefs was divided. Okay, so talking about the land of Israel was divided. So this is talking about the future prophecy where, although Israel is currently in the land right now, 2022, it's prophesying that it's going to be, that the land of Israel will be divvied up once again because the people will be taken into captivity. Otherwise, how will Yehoshua rescue them when he returns? There has to be a need for him to return, and there is no need for him to return if the people are in relative peace. Yes, they're launching rockets at them sometimes, but it's not to the point where they are calling out for help, where they're really, there's like a cry for help collectively from all parts of Israel, and they are not in dire, straits, that their existence is being threatened on a mass scale. Yes, it's being threatened by people, politicians, and leaders of certain nations are threatening their existence, but it's not to the point where they're crying out, Hosanna, save us, Lord. Nothing like that. They're relying on their military, essentially, is what's happening in their modern day. but it has to reach a point where this prophecy will be fulfilled and their land will be divided. So it doesn't sound like a blessing, but this circumstance will lead to a blessing, which is Yah coming down once again, but the second time, and saving his people. So big difference. The Lord, or Adonai, or I should say Yah wrought righteousness and his judgment with Israel. So this land being divided and them being in captivity, although it doesn't mention their captivity, but when the land is divided, Yah will work righteousness, whether it's the dividing of the land being his judgment upon Israel, only to save them later, or perhaps it's talking about how the land was divided before the inception of Israel in 1948, where they kept dividing the land, but then he eventually worked his righteousness by giving them the land. So it's hard to say which one it is. I lean on the former, where it's still future to be ultimately fulfilled and to see its fruition when the Messiah comes back. Verse 22, Bashan is in modern-day Syria. That's important to know. Verse 23, the fullness of good things. Versus satisfied with favor. So are you going to be satisfied with somebody favoring you? Yeah, perhaps, but to be full of good things is a different story. It means you're being provided for over and above your needs. Verse 24, he shall versus let him. So these are more like promises. He shall be acceptable versus let him be, and he shall dip his foot in oil, or let him. So it's saying allow him to, but on the other hand, and the Septuagint rather, these are promises. You shall be. This will be done. It's as good as done. Verse 26, the beloved versus Jeshurun. So there's not any such as the Elohim of the beloved versus the El of Jeshurun, the upright, essentially is what it means. It comes from Yashur, which relates to the book of Jasher, or Yashur, which means upright. He who rides upon the heaven is your helper, and the magnificent one of the firmament. So this is a prophecy, and it's also speaking about who their Elohim is, who Yah is. And when I say Yah, I'm not just talking about the Father, it's also referring to the Son, to the lawģos, because in the prophecy, multiple prophecies, especially in Revelation and the other prophets, he is described as the one who rides the cloud rider, as Joel Richardson has referred to. He rides upon the heaven. He's actually going to come down from the heavens, future event, with his thousands of angels. So he's their Elohim, the one who rides on the clouds. He's the one who's going to help them, not just help them, but save them. The magnificent one of the firmament. So that's a noun. Versus rides upon the heaven in your help. So only when you need help, he'll be there in the Masoretic, and in his excellency on the sky. That's an adjective, not a noun, not saying he's the one, their Elohim. He's not the magnificent one. So you can even fill in here one with echad. You can say the magnificent one, or replace it with echad, which means multiple things. The magnificent unified one, the magnificent perfect, the magnificent first, the magnificent constant, magnificent same. But there are many meanings for the word echad. But essentially that, I believe this might be pointing to echad. which Jehovah or Yah is one, is echad, as recited in the Shema. Again, it doesn't mean one as in singular, it means multiple things. It means complete, it means constant, it means same, it means unified. It harkens back to Adam and Eve being echad, harkens back to Yeshua praying that I pray they may be one as we are one. Again, it's not a just physical descriptor. It's not limited to what we think of as one being one singular. It means something much greater in the Hebraic understanding. Okay, verse 27, we see and we see the omission of the rule of, and the rule of God shall protect you, and that under the strength, which is omitted, of the everlasting arms. So the rule of God shall protect you. It sounds like the government of, or the law of. It's hard to say. Verses, the eternal Elohim is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. So that still makes sense in the Masoretic. It's just not, it doesn't specify that the rule of God will protect you, perhaps the government of God by his authority, and under the strength of the everlasting arms. Okay, it seems to be similar in both. And he shall cast forth the enemy from before your face, saying, perish, versus destroy. So we can see the difference here is that Yah is doing the killing. Mashiach is doing the killing. He's the one who's destroying the enemy. He's casting forth the enemy. He's the one taking the action, taking the initiative. Versus Yah is setting Israel up. He's setting them up to do the killing. He's lining up their enemy, and saying, "Okay, here, take the shot, take the killing blow." You just pause this for a moment. Okay, pardon the interruption. So, verse 28, we can see here confidence versus safety. Once again, the land of Jacob versus the fountain of Jacob. So I want to just note here, I didn't mention it in my notes, but the land of Jacob is Israel, the land of Israel. But the fountain of Jacob, it could be a well. However, in the scriptures, when you read fountain, sometimes it is a code for a man's reproductive organ, just to make note of that. But in the Septuagint, it is not leaving it up to interpretation. It is the land of Jacob, Israel. And the sky shall be misty with dew upon you. Verses, also his heavens shall drop down dew. So you will have a lot of dew in the Septuagint. In the Masoretic, you will have dew, but not specific as to the amount that is dropping on you. It's not saying it's going to be misty. It's going to drop down dew. You're not sure if it's going to be misty or just a light dew. Light sprinkling, perhaps. Verse 29, blessed are you. Versus happy are you. They seem to be interchangeable. I know in the Beatitudes it says blessed are and happy are. I'm leaning towards blessed. Again, the Septuagint is just more reliable. Your helper shall hold his shield over you versus the shield of your help. So we can see the difference here is he is your helper, referring to Yah. Yah is the shield. He's the one helping them. Versus the focus in the Masoretic, the focus is on him being your shield only. So he is helping them, but he's only the shield. Whereas we can see the helper is not limited to just being a shield. And then it says here, and his sword is your boast. So we can see, the same helper has not just a shield, but a sword, which is their boast. Verses, and who is the sword of your excellency? So we can see your boast, your pride, his sword versus just his excellency. Your enemies shall speak falsely to you, and you shall tread upon their neck, versus you shall tread upon their high places. So we can see this seems to be hearkening to the prophecies that we have not gotten into yet, but in Daniel, it speaks of a covenant made with many for a period of time. I believe it is 7 years. And in the middle of said covenant, there will be a breach of this treaty or this peace agreement. So it seems to be that this covenant is actually done with false intentions, or with falsity behind it, because it's being breached in the middle of the 7 years. So this is perhaps hearkening to that, this verse, because the enemies shall speak falsely to you, Israel, and you, talking about the Messiah, is going to tread upon their neck. So they're not going to get away with this treachery. So that's all for this chapter. This is the second last chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to wrap up this chapter and the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, in the next video. I'm very excited for that. And we can move on to the book of Joshua and into unfamiliar territory, because the Torah seems to be something that, especially if you cover Torah portions, or if you are familiar with the Torah portions, they do those on the Shabbat, and they cover the full Torah, all 5 books, within a certain time frame, whether it's a year or more than that. So this is going to be a little bit new when we get to Joshua. I'm very excited for that. And then moving on to my favorite books in the Bible, which are the books of the Kings. Very exciting time. Looking forward to that. So thank you for your time. May God bless you and make your way prosperous. Until next time, this is the Septuagint versus the Masoretic. Shalom and Maranatha.